좀 이거 통영 뭐 세다지를 와서 같이 따서요. 또 뭐게 그거는 뭐지 말이야. 리지되는 다뭐 저도 다 된대가 내요도 된대가 강해라 되네. 어디다 가죠.
However, despite that wish and despite having the intelligence and capacity to be able to develop those positive mental qualities, certain human beings struggle. They struggle because they lack enough to eat. They might not have clean water. They might be living in a place where there is war or poverty. And because so much energy is going into surviving, they don't have the time to dedicate to mental development. So those of us who are here living in such a society, certainly we experience problems. But when we compare our problems to those beings in the unfortunate realms, or even to human beings who are lacking the basic necessity, we'll see that actually our problems are not so significant. It is we ourselves who make them significant. So if we want to develop these positive mental qualities, which are the causes of lasting happiness, what is the first step to doing that? It is establishing a calm and vast, open mind. And we also have to watch our response to what we experience in our lives. So of course, being in samsara, so that's a word for a cyclic existence, certainly we're going to encounter problems. But we shouldn't focus on those problems and constantly abide in a state of dissatisfaction. So when we talk about where we're trying to go, that type of vast happiness, it's a state called liberation. And liberation means a state where suffering has been cleared away completely and we are only experiencing happiness. So we understand that as people striving towards liberation, we can't do that with our old habits. As a first step, we need to establish a broader, vaster mind. So if we have the idea that I have this magnificent opportunity, in my current state right now, actually I have lots of reasons to be happy. And if we cultivate that positive outlook as a first step, we will be able to work towards achieving that lasting happiness. So if we recognize the inner power we have, and we use that recognition to bring forth a courageous or a brave attitude to our life, then laziness will not be able to discourage us from working towards that lasting happiness. Because of course, laziness is a big obstacle in our spiritual practice. So please bring forth this hopeful attitude, recognizing that as a human being with this intelligence, with these outer conditions, with all of these inner conditions, I can absolutely work towards a better, lasting state of happiness. So think on the basis of this capacity, on the basis of this courage, I'm going to do my best to develop the positive mental qualities within myself. I'm going to do the best to nourish love and compassion. So we'll do a preliminary meditation just to calm the mind, and we can imagine that any distracting, disturbing thoughts, these dissolve just like the clouds dissolve by the rays of the sun. So as we sit, it's not so important where we're sitting, but we do want to keep our back relatively straight.
channel za chung za chung channel then you talk kada you know
when the back is straight, the body is straight. When the body is straight, the energy channels are straight. When the energy channels are straight, the winds or the prana can flow freely. Any thoughts that have been disturbing me, anything that is worrying me, just like clouds in the sky, the moisture is absorbed by the sun, they are cleared away. And think whatever has been occupying my mind, whether it is wholesome, whether it is unwholesome, I'm just going to set that aside for a moment. So think that my mind has been cleared away of those distractions, and my mind is vast, clean, and clear. And when we rest our mind free of thoughts, it's said to have a neutral character. So that neutral character is useful because it can help us tap into equanimity. So the mind is neutral, and what that means is that it can be led into whichever direction we direct our attention. So that means if we direct our attention to what is unwholesome, the mind will become unwholesome. If we direct our attention to what is wholesome, the mind will become wholesome. But when we understand that the mind's basic nature is neutral, is equanimity, we understand that these disturbing mental states, like attachment, like anger, like jealousy, these are not the true nature of our mind. So we can think that actually, if you think like about something like a banana, these disturbing mental states like anger, jealousy, and so forth, these are like the peel. But once we peel those back, right, the true nature of the banana, the true nature of the mind is revealed. So no matter how disturbing a thought, no matter how disturbing a feeling that might arise within us, this is not the true nature of our mind. When we let go of those disturbing thoughts and attitudes, we tap into this mind which is pure, luminous, and vast, a mind which can bring forth any positive quality and perfect it. If I establish love in my mind, if I establish compassion in my mind, if I establish patience in my mind, these qualities can be perfected. So if we take this mind and its capacity, and we take these positive mental qualities like love and compassion, and we mix them together like milk mixed with water, then we create the conditions to ourselves experience happiness, and we will also be a person who is able to bring happiness to our family members, to all human beings, to all sentient beings, animals and so forth, who encounter us. So if we have the capacity to travel such a path and to achieve that, why would we not make the decision to embark on that journey? So, based upon tapping into this potential of the mind, establishing this relaxed state, then I will, using these positive mental qualities, guide myself and all beings to enlightenment. For this purpose, I request the assistance of the holy beings, Buddha, Tara, Manjushri, and so forth, to bestow their blessings. And so for all of us who are gathered today in this place or from home, think that may the positive potential we accumulate today become the cause for ourselves and for all sentient beings to achieve that lasting ultimate happiness. So we'll pause there. Yeah, so this was to set the motivation for the session with that brief meditation before the teaching. And so for those of you who have come to Geshe-la's teachings before, you'll know that the motivation is very important as we embark on the practice. So before the session, the motivation is likened to the seed that we plant in the ground. So if the seed is for something that is beneficial and wholesome, then the result of the session will be something that is wholesome. Similarly, if we have a poisonous seed, that gives rise to a plant that is poisonous and to a session that is poisonous. And so in terms of the wholesome motivation, so for example, if you come to a talk like this, we can have different motivations. So we may be in the same room, but for very different purposes. Somebody might be thinking, okay, I'm coming to just try and be happier. I want to be happier in my life. And that's absolutely fine, and that is a positive motivation. But because you're just considering yourself, it's limited in its positive potential.
아까서 어떤 예수서 거 토지지다 나가서 나 이나 거 된 가디는 거를 저기 때문에 답이 되어지 그거 좀 봐지네 달래가 제가 이나 타바 마도 받다 디베도
But from the point of view of this working for individual happiness, if we think like this, okay, I am a human being, and right now I am enjoying these good conditions of what we call the fortunate realms. But as long as I remain within samsara, I could fall back again into the unfortunate realms of existence. Therefore, I won't be able to achieve true happiness until I am out of samsara. And for this reason, I seek the bliss of liberation. This is a vaster motivation, a big picture motivation for the individual level.
어다로 소소세는 멋지래. 어다 예세는 다 메인 먹타이 가지고 돈로이는 다 딜레죠. 아주 메고 들어다 돈로 스테이지 가서 자정 좀 왔어.
But that's just taking into account one person, ourselves. What if we were to take that motivation and expand it out to others, and not just think about other human beings, of which, as we know, there are countless, but also think of all of those beings in the animal realms, right down to the tiniest insect. Then we see that others are so much vaster in number than just ourselves.
어다 돼지 강가 들리지가 않았더니 요나 할래 하면도 소소든 요 맨 할래 싫어요.
And so you might think, well, okay, like, why is that a big deal? Like, why is that something that I should consider? And definitely, if we were disconnected from all of these sentient beings, then yeah, it's not that big a deal.
나 이나에 나좀 말이 빠질 거 아니야. 그 동거자 말이야. 나로서 나 세야 돼. 생치 알레 요주도 내어야 지.
But that's just this limited view because of this veil of ignorance. If we look at the big picture, we'll see that that we call the I, or that we call the self, could have been connected to countless beings during our time in samsara. Every single being we could have been connected to.
다 뭐지게서 다 된리라고 요 말로 왔어. 뭐지게서 어쨌든 매서 나서 매로서 때 매서도 강가 주도 뭐 제그
And of course, also understanding that if we're just thinking that at the time of death from this life, that's when the story is over, then it's going to be hard to make the argument that we're connected to all sentient beings, because you just have one life and then it's over.
다 믿다. 당 아주 미치도 치유를 지게 잡고도 되어야 할 테니 이나 좀 예내서도 더 그거야. 예내서는 매나 아주 길게 그요 말이야.
And so, generally, as we proceed with this topic, Geshe wants you to understand that, of course, what he is speaking about is the Buddha Dharma, but he does his best to connect the Buddha Dharma with reality, with the way things really are beyond religion. And if we can't do that, actually there's not so much use. So many scientists, when they look at the teachings of Buddhism, they say that Buddhism is not necessarily a religion in the traditional sense. It's a little bit like a science of the mind. So the Buddha said, I have laid out the path to liberation for you, but you yourselves must determine what to practice and not. The Buddha did not say, because I am the Buddha, therefore you have to listen to what I say. Because this person or that person is said to be holy, therefore you have to accept what they say. That's not what the Buddha taught. So that's quite different for a spiritual tradition, isn't it? And even different for most people, because a lot of people, based on their position, based upon their name, they're like, I said this, therefore you have to follow it. But this isn't the approach that the Buddha took. So actually, one of the first things that we want to cultivate as we approach the Buddhist path is a mind of doubt, a mind of curious doubt. So, as Geshe introduces these concepts, you don't have to kind of like take everything right away. You can question, like, Past and future lifetimes. Okay, is that something that makes sense logically? Is that a thing? Liberation, total freedom from suffering. Is that really possible? Buddhas, fully enlightened beings, is that really something that is there or not?
하고서 어디다 저도지 집에 숨겨 요래 나로서 준비해서 뭐 넘버고 놓도 되게 매저 말 대시잖아요 대 소소이나 디 뭔가 그렇게 되세요.
So His Holiness the Dalai Lama encourages this approach of rigorous investigation, which he calls the approach of practitioners of sharp faculties, and that is the way that we should embark on these topics.
하고서를 어디다 들이지 이자서 소소 대해서 또 잡아지 되는 또 빠져서야 그한테 할 일을 가지고 대해서 이식을 보이는 가르쳐 예에서 대해서 뭐 자샤자 들이지 된데래 뉴스 지지 통하지 거.
Ale tigogides.
아,
Ale. 나서 대성거기des 단다.
제시오 태솔라들이 띄워서 가라와서 띄워서
So Geshe was just saying that once we have investigated, then we come to a conclusion, and then once we come to a conclusion, then we can bring forward that faith and that belief. I was saying Geshe was laughing because I was saying like we told people to doubt, and now it sounds like we're asking people to believe, but this is like a process, right? We use the doubt to get to that stage of belief. So this belief is not a blind faith, but it's like a confidence that comes from engaging in one's own investigation and coming to the conclusion, right, that this is something that makes sense, that this is something that is possible. And at its very highest sense, it's what is called a tsema, a pramana, or a valid cognition, which is like an incontrovertible conclusion.
그래서 또 무슨 문제도 들이 자치고 Geshe Sonam 다 그렇게 기도도 자치고 먹게라 친구지 길라야 되네 이나면아 고도바사.
So the sharp faculty bodhisattvas, as they approach any Buddhist teacher, even the Buddha would say something and they might say, okay, I respect this person tremendously, but is what he or she is saying completely true or not, right? They have the courage to approach it with that doubt.
하고서로 다 기재와 시험이 들었더니 다 단서 말이 봐서 이내 뒤져를 간지스레 하고서로 군도사를 간디 뒤져래 어디서 야바도 아니 시라 야가데 돈이도 비시라서는 이내 뒤도 모두 기재와 시험이 알아왔어. So
for example, if they're hearing teachings on the nature of reality, they might think, okay, this ignorance grasping at the self, what does that look like and how does it operate? Is it something that's really damaging? What about anger? Is that something that is really as bad as they say it is? Patience, is that something that I can apply and that I can see really works? Wisdom, is that something that can really be brought forth? So they approach this they approach these things with some skepticism. And the nice thing about the sharp faculty approach is because once the person comes to accept these things, it is the result of that vigorous investigation. Then when they study, then when they meditate, they do so with full confidence and it unfolds. And they understand what they're working towards. So the practitioner becomes like those athletes, professional athletes. They have to endure a lot of discomfort, a lot of physical problems and so forth. But because they're so focused on their goal, which is in that case winning the game, they don't notice the discomfort. So this practitioner will have that kind of determination. And so to go back to our main topic then, when we speak about the motivation, we want to go beyond just thinking about ourselves to the motivation to bring happiness, to bring benefit to both ourselves and others. When we bring forth this vast kind of motivation, positive potential or merit is accumulated on the basis of every single being. So the amount of positive potential we can create is inexpressibly vast. So this is really important because when we bring forth that motivation, we have a great accumulation of merit. It is on the basis of this accumulation of merit, we could also maybe call it positive energy, that when one meditates, one's meditation will be very successful. And so when we talked about these positive mental qualities, these wholesome states that we're trying to bring forth, they can be divided into two broad categories. We can talk about qualities of method and qualities of wisdom. And these qualities of method and wisdom, these are like the two wings of the bird, which can take us across the ocean of samsara, across the ocean of suffering, to the other shore of Buddhahood, to becoming a bodhisattva, to achieving liberation. So this is our task. We talked about the nature of the mind being neutral but also being vast and luminous. On that basis then, to establish the practices of method and wisdom within us, which are going to allow us to travel the path to that lasting and ultimate happiness. And so today's topic actually is the practice of the 5 powers or the 5 forces. And these 5 powers are really aimed at bringing forth those practices of method and wisdom. So these teachings on the 5 forces actually, they're divided into 2 categories. The first are the 5 sources that we use in this lifetime in order to kind of improve and train our minds. And the other category is facing that which we will all face, right, the end of this life. The 5 forces or the 5 powers as applied at the time of death. So because all of us are alive, at least for the moment, Geshe is going to focus today's session on the 5 powers to be cultivated during this life. So Geshe just wanted to say, like, as by way of an introduction, right, he made many kind of introductory remarks, but in terms of this actual topic of the 5 powers, this has a kum, so a source. So this means that these teachings on the 5 powers are rooted in the teachings of the holy beings, of realized individuals. So if we were to kind of just say the 5 powers in a very easy way to enumerate them, the first is the power of the intention. So here we say power of intention, but it's a little bit like what we did before, like a motivation, except making it even maybe a bit more vast. So this first force of the intention, some also say the force of the projection, it's like saying, until I reach this aim that I have set, which is achieving the welfare of myself and others, I will continuously strive towards that. So that is the power of the intention. Yeah, so that's an easy way to explain it, although there are different ways. And so another thing that in terms of these five and the way that they're enumerated, depending on kind of the context of the five forces or the five powers that we're talking about, the order can change. So the second one is the force of the white seed. So we have to go beyond the first power, right? Because that's the intention, and an intention, as wonderful as it is, eventually we have to move beyond that attention to application. And so the power of the white seed, in fact, is based upon those intentions, the seeds that we plant within the mind. So seeds of love, seeds of compassion, and so forth. These are the powers of the white seed. And as we plant the white seeds within our mind, we can look at it as the foundational beginning about what is our wish, right? Our wish is to be able to achieve a lasting state of happiness that is completely untouched by suffering. These seeds that we plant of love and compassion and so forth, these help us to achieve that. So then that is the second one, the power of the white seed. So the third one, this gets translated differently. We can talk about the power of repulsion. We can also talk about the power of eliminating all at once. So this is the third of these forces. So the power of repulsion involves looking at what is unwholesome. For example, we look at the mind of anger and we think, why is anger something that is unwholesome? What are the problems that anger and so forth can cause? And then on that basis, making this firm kind of determination that I'm definitely going to diminish or abandon anger. This is the power of repulsion. And similarly, as these are mind training or lojong teachings, we can also think of the self-centered attitude, sometimes called self-cherishing, though I prefer self-centered. So if you think about the self-centered attitude, why is this something negative? How does this cause problems for myself and others? And then this firm determination to abandon and diminish that, this is the power of repulsion from abandoning the self-centered attitude. So Geshe, let's clarify. It actually goes to the reason I think people misunderstand this word sometimes. So when we talk about self-cherishing, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to care about yourself. But self-cherishing, as it's being used here, is you're so concerned about yourself that you're completely disregarding the needs of others. That's the attitude that needs to be abandoned here. So that is the power of repulsion. So the next one is the power of prayer. So all of the positive things that we've done, we don't want to waste the positive potential of that. So we dedicate them by the force of prayer to may these become the cause of me being able to reach that state of attainment, that ultimate spiritual goal. So this is the force of prayer. So the holy beings say you can look at it a little bit like a bank account. When you do something positive, that positive potential goes into your balance. So we can make the deposit through the power of prayer. So here it's the force of prayer, but Geshe said in a way it's also the dedication of merits. And for those of you who are familiar, we know that when we dedicate the merits, then there's less of a danger of those diminishing. So we know all through our own experience that if something happens on the wrong day, a very little thing can make us extremely angry, and we know that anger is something that or the force of our merit. So that's why it's so important to dedicate when we've done something positive. Yeah. So it's just like if you wanted to keep some water, right? But you place the cup outside on a hot day, you know that eventually all of what's in the cup will evaporate, right? So similarly, the positive things that we've done and the positive force that comes from that, if we leave them unprotected by dedication, anger, just like the sun, can completely dry out what is positive. So when we make a dedication, to use the same analogy of the cup of water, what happens to that? It's like pouring that water into a lake or into the ocean. As long as that lake abides, as long as that ocean abides, something of the potential of that water, that positive potential will abide as well. Yes. So we can see really clearly from the analogy, I'm sorry, that once the body of water is vast enough, right, the sun is not going to be able to evaporate it completely. So through that practice of dedication of a prayer, that the force of those merits, they'll abide. They're protected from the sun, which is like anger. So until lake is dried up, as it says in the Buddhist Sutra, some of its potential will be available to us. So that is the force of prayer, using this easy analogy. And it's something that we understand through analogies, because right now we're not able to understand it through our direct experience, right? We'll have to develop more wisdom to do that. So then in terms of those holy beings now, when we talk about the Buddha, when we talk about Maitreya, when we talk about Tara, they also started out like this, and through the benefits of what was dedicated, were able to reach their goals. And it's also important to know that when we talk about these holy beings like the Buddha, like Maitreya, like Tara, right? Happened. They started out just as ordinary beings like us, and through engaging in these practices, we're able to achieve realization. Then when we come to the discussion of the fifth force or power, this is the force of habituation. So why is habituation important? Well, let's step back for a moment and think about some of the things we talked about developing. Patience, love, and compassion. When we bring those forth in the mind, we have that direct experience that it brings us happiness, don't we?
그냥 가만히 드리스마도 세라마데는 기고트에 도요 기체요 가도 하고 시타지래.
Even if we just hold those qualities in our mind for as little as 1 or 2 minutes, we'll see that our whole mental state changes, right? It becomes happier.
배는 너무 나와지는 녀마치를 코 드리시는 템버데스나요. 다 되게 소소 놀로 가리이나 기고전에 대토요 가도 하고 시타지래.
We also see that when love and compassion are practiced, this brings happiness to the environment. Like, for example, a family will become harmonious. Even the pets that are kept in a family home will be happier. So we see the benefits of these minds. Yeah.
다 지키듯이 매일이나 나한테 그걸 끼고 나가서
Yes, yeah. So the dogs and the cat family home, they will also be more relaxed and happy.
다 강간요라서
Whereas if we see a family where, like, for example, the husband and wife are fighting, or the family is always in conflict, you know, the animals might become aggressive, or you might have the cat that's always like hiding away in the corner.
다 이나요. 어때야 거기도 되는 때문에 되면 다 컨트롤도 다 되게 세 누가 될지 가서 내가 때지마도 마다는 강해지게 봐. 안서 시워하고.
And so we understand the benefits of those minds like love and compassion, but we're not able to hold them. And similarly, we see on the temporary level immediately all of the damage that anger does, yet we continuously find ourselves experiencing it.
다 그나 말이 바이나래 대저 컨트롤 가자 저도 강가 인해서는 컨트롤 덴바치 코로 선서 덴바치
And when we think about these minds like anger, ignorance, jealousy, and so forth, we also understand that they're not based on any reasonable, rational mind, right? They don't have any kind of valid backing. Whereas love, compassion, patience, and so forth, these mental qualities, they are logical. They are coming from a basis in truth. So we know that they are true. We know that they have these logical backings. So why aren't we able to maintain these positive mental states like love and compassion? And so this problem that Geshe has pointed out, this relates to the fifth power, which is habituation. So if we take a mistake in mind, for example, like anger, we've already said that it's not grounded in truth. It's not based on logic or reason, yet it arises very easily. Why is this the case? It's because of habituation. So it doesn't have that power of truth behind it, but because of habituation, right? That anger is able to arise very easily. So we think about patience and wisdom, for example, and we are convinced about the benefits and we understand how beneficial they are. We also understand in logic that they are rooted in truth. Yet when we bring them forth, they're fleeting. We can't hold on to them in the mind in a meaningful way. Why is this the case? Because although they're grounded in truth, they're grounded in reality, right? We don't have habituation with those positive qualities like love and compassion. Therefore, we can't maintain them. And it's also really important to understand what is grounded in truth or not. Because if anger were grounded in truth, for example, much of our practice, there wouldn't be very much that we could do. This is actually, when we understand it, really important. The fact that anger is powerful only because of habituation, but not grounded in truth. Whereas love, compassion and so forth are grounded in truth, in reality.
다 공비도 기본 내매잖아요. 나도래가
Los.
하고서라.
Sí.
어다데 공비도 내매 자토소나 내미도 요요하게 다 계속 좀 몰라.
So, what is our task then? It's to apply the power of habituation to those positive qualities instead of what is negative. If we apply our power of habituation to love and compassion, for example, then we will come to a good result.
어다 들리지 있었던 교수서 노신 너도서 가말. 기본소리 내가 제하시 요아스 이제 뭐.
So if we think about all of these reasons, then we are able to kind of apply ourselves to practice in a happy way.
하고서 와서 어떻게 아니나 자지면 기본소 그게 뽑아지 걸어 왔을 때 내서도 니가 보지
Yes, and so if we become convinced of the truth of this, we will be able to bring forth a courageous attitude that we have something that is really going to bring happiness.
어다 들리지 있어 상가를 뭐 저좀 제기 폴리스 그 자가 같은 개개지 제기 지고 뭐 진영도 야가 상가를 뭐 때문에 다를 가워요에서
So one time, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, there were some people who were, I think it was football or cricket. So they came to the Dalai Lama and they asked him, like, what is your favorite sport to be watching? So the Dalai Lama said before he watched sports a little bit, but these days he was much more interested to watch the game that was unfolding in the mind. So there's these kind of two sides, right? The wholesome and the unwholesome in our mind. And it's almost as if they're playing a game against each other. So we want to see who can win, who can gain the advantage. We can have a playful approach to treating the mind. And also this is also observing what is going on in the mind is something that is always available to us. If we have some time at home, we can begin to observe. So we can think a bit about a dialogue unfolding in the mind, and perhaps it might go something like this. When we try to develop our love and compassion, anger, attachment, and ignorance are going to protest, right? Because of habituation, they're going to say, we've been here with this person from the very beginning. This is not a place for you to stay. And so anger and so forth can say, from lifetime to lifetime in the past, I've been telling him or her what to do, how to act, and they've always been listening. So really this kind of, there's a text that Geshe was talking about self-grasping ignorance, and it's like this dialogue, right, where these negative minds that they're habituated to are kind of talking to those positive qualities. So love and compassion, they could respond that, yes, you have been with this person for a long time. The afflictions have been with this person for a long time, but they are not grounded in truth and grounded in reality. So therefore, they cannot stay forever. Eventually, we will be able to overcome them. So the doer here, we are the ones that have to take a responsibility and tell the afflictions, right, that you are here temporarily, right? You are adventitious. You will eventually be cleared away. So you know that if you've had guests in your home, right, it can be a source of solace that, okay, you're only going to be here for a few days, and then eventually they're going to live again. Yeah. So no matter how difficult or unpleasant your guest might be at times, you know, okay, this is just for a little bit, and eventually they're going to go back home. Yeah. Yeah. So it's the same with our unwholesome minds, right, or what we call the afflictions, right? It's the same. They're just going to be here for a while. What is in that? Yes, yeah. Yeah, and so, like, In this way, when we direct our attention inwards, right, we're not paying so much attention outward to the problems, but we see how the afflictions are working, right? We see that there are afflictions that are kind of at the center of things, and then these go out to the branch afflictions, and then there's other mistaken minds which are kind of like the servants, right? So they're operating together.
단에서 들리지 다용 아주 쇼션바도 니지 다 시라 쇼를 고자 되잖아. 단 오시와시마 대신 거래. 단다 깔래요. 상다고 지는 것도 아주 대순이 좀 많아.
Yeah, and the other thing too, when we're practicing things like love, compassion, trying to bring forth more wisdom, sometimes in the Buddhist context, we're thinking like, okay, this is going to benefit me in my future lives. And sometimes that can actually be a little bit discouraging because it seems like the payoff is a long way off.
하고 대려 와스 단단히 니마 더가로니 대신 거죠.
But it's actually not the case because if we start right now developing those positive qualities, right in this very day, we'll experience a greater measure of happiness.
야, 난조라 지발에 강했더니 괜찮더니
And Geshe just said, like, in his own experience, he can see that when he's fallen into like a difficult state of mind that's even been going on for a few months, sometimes just changing his way of thinking a little bit, bringing forth a positive quality just a little bit, immediately that heavy feeling is gone, even if it was there for a couple of months. So really, like, if we are able to establish this vast mind and have that as the basis and bring forth that quality, we can have like almost like an instantaneous generation of a more positive mental state. So Geshe was saying that some of the holy beings, they've likened the mind to leather. So we know that leather at first is very like hard and difficult. But the more you work with the leather, like the more you work it or the more you wear your shoes, the more flexible it becomes. So in fact, the mind is a little bit like that. So the moment, right, that we start to try for that transformation, the moment we start to get more flexibility, we get that benefit. And so generally we talk about when we talk about our physical and mental health. Physical health is very important, but from the Buddhist point of view, we're focused on our mental health. So when we talk about illnesses like the body, like if we have a sore or a wound on our body, sometimes that can take weeks or even months to heal. But things in the mind are like, if we introduce the right antidote, we can shift like a depression that's even been there for a few months, and the state of mind can completely change. And so how can we achieve this? Well, the first thing is that problem or a difficulty, don't immediately look outside. Like, right, our habit is usually to look for the person or the circumstance outside that we can blame, right? But instead, direct the attention inward. And then once we direct the attention inward to our own mind, then we've created the space to be able to have that transformation that Geshe mentioned. Yeah. So our habit right now is we're not, thanks. So our habit right now is not to look at ourselves, but instead to turn the attention outward, to say this or that person, they did this particular thing. They didn't fulfill their part. They did not act in this way.
세시오 소속 소노도 된 논은 내스데 슈소. 소속 레가지도 된 논은 대 슈스로 저도 저렇게요.
And we don't pay the attention to ourselves, like what was the mistake that I made that could have led to the situation? What was my way of thinking or my action that could have led to this situation? So directing that attention more inward, right? Being more self-reflective. This is a really important point. And once we do that, then it will be a little bit easier to solve the problem, because actually we don't have control over the other person or the outer situation, do we? But we do have some measure of control over ourselves and our reaction. Yeah, so we'll propose a 10-minute break at this point. There's some coffee and some drinks at the back, and those of you who are at home also feel free to grab a cup of tea or whatever. So we'll come back at 2:20.
You're okay? You wanted 2 minutes?
Yeah, many.
Ready? Okay,
We haven't decided
Can you just turn the volume on? I'll just say some announcements to the folks at home just so that say hi everybody. Thanks for bearing with us. It is a bit of everyone's sitting down and we'll get started here. Just call it Usually we're not in a social situation, so it's we're taking a bit longer. Yeah, no, I'm just talking to those folks. But yeah. Yeah. It's on there. Yeah. So welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your tea or coffee, and we'll get back to it.
오늘 다 가게 되네. 다 같이 줄 때다. 기세 뭐도 그 말에 되네. 소소소 다. 야, 노래 있는 가디나 소소 끼워 입고 다 좋아해.
So in terms of the things that Geshe was mentioning here, one of the important things, like when you're at home and when you have time, is to think about these various points, right? And the reasons that we have to be happy, right? The good things that we have. So it's really good to have a sense of perspective about our own lives, right? In terms of cultivating this vast mind. If we look around the world, the kinds of unbelievable suffering that even other human beings experience in terms of a lot of the wars and the other terrible things that are happening in the world, we'll really see actually that we have a lot of reasons to be happy in our situation.
This one,
Yeah. So the Lamas say that if you shake your head from left to right all the time, you won't be able to clearly see what is in front of you. So when we're like in an angry state of mind or an agitated state of mind, any unwholesome state, it's like we're shaking our head back and forth. We won't be able to perceive a situation clearly. So we should understand that as long as we are influenced by these states of mind like anger, aversion, and so forth, right? Things will not be able to come out well. But in terms of helping us with that, to have this broad-minded attitude, to have this sort of vaster outlook, looking at how our situation compares to that of many others, and really seeing all the reasons that we have to be happy, this will help to prevent that state of dissatisfaction from arising, always thinking that things are not good enough, things could be better, which can sometimes lead to anger.
하고서 오다 드리지가 돈에 나가서 세계에 대도 다른 거자 가르치나 셀레레지와나 다 여고 좀 봤어.
And if we have a relaxed and open mind, then our meditation practice will be more successful, our development of positive mental qualities will be more successful, right? It's all connected.
다 나로서 나세야 대도 다 셈세야 되니데 가디나 코카타요 말이 이렇게
And so, in terms of the big picture, that we call the self, along with that we call my mind, these have to travel continuously together.
다 린데 코로다 쿠마노 지레마도 코카디는 로요.
So in this way, the body is just like a hotel room or a house that we've rented. We're not always going to be able to take it with us.
다 드리지 타는 뭐 로고요. 대 타니 워머레 타리 원로가 와서 갈기 갈강에 그거 매사 그 주요한 거나 가디는 코리아 보시고 와서.
So this body will leave behind, but we should understand that we call the self and that we call my mind continues, right? That is going to continue perpetually. So we'll continually be faced with this issue of wishing to avoid suffering and wanting to achieve a stable happiness.
다 드리지 자 셀 니빠요 뭐 그거 대도 녀들 세계에 대고 슈처처로야 다 보여 할래도 보시고.
And because of that, if we want to achieve that stable happiness within this mind stream, we're going to need to develop a lot of capacity, a lot of potential, and we're also going to have to plant a lot of positive seeds.
다 대단다 또 나고 저도 다 가디스 단단히 가디스 다 구하도 마서 tempo 가디스 그 되는 얘기잖아요. 구마도 나고 대시 가라 tempo 그
And so then, related to developing our mind in this way, we can think about these 5 powers a little bit like a house. First, establishing a solid foundation, then building the walls, and so forth. Yeah, so we gave a brief overview of each of the 5, and now in our time remaining, Geshe is going to go into a little bit more detail. And for those of you who are here, but also those of you who are home, if Dave will keep an eye on the chat for us, if a question comes up in the meantime that you would like to ask, please don't be afraid to get our attention. So our task with this mind, which we looked at as being like a game between these 2 teams of the unwholesome mental states and the positive mental qualities. So in that way, we have to understand a kind of what needs to be improved and taken up and what should be abandoned. And we understand that the relationship between the unwholesome states and the positive mental qualities is like the relationship between heat and cold. So when we increase one side, the other naturally decreases. Yes. So because the text also contains some instructions from the great beings, Geshe is going to read a few sentences from the text. And so what I'll do is, if you've registered on our mailing list, I'll also provide a link where you can find this text and all the information. It's available for free online. Yeah. Sorry, not so the color Okay. So there are 5 forces for condensing the practice in one lifetime, namely this lifetime. The first force is the intention that we throw ahead of us.
다들 소주지 세 공도 배워가지고 로족에 년에 더가지고 제대 접이 레카비 예대 총화지를 씌워서지 멜론데지요 어사.
We wish, may I always be able to develop a bodhicitta aim. May I always be able to practice mind training. May I always be able to develop the good qualities that will truly enable me to benefit others.
나제 글로그 또 배만은 대대대 접이 치에다 딱이 답이사.
Throwing ahead the force of our intention is like making a preparation to fulfill these wishes.
어다 때문에 뱀이 또 당길라야 돼. 뉴스다 뱀이 또 세레다 그거 딱이 나오거든.
So Geshe said intention here is almost like throwing the motivation, like throwing a stone to mark the space ahead.
나로서 이니민이 당길라야 돼. 롱게 때문에 다시 예지 때문에 다시 맞지 저게야 돼. 하고서라 로데 다시 봐 이나요 쇼마도 이제 다시 봐. 소주지세 그거 요하래. 아니 예데 다시 봐 들어봐 이나요 되니 아니 그거 요하래.
And in terms of the intention we're throwing, it is related to love, compassion, and bodhicitta. Because in terms of achieving our own welfare completely, this depends upon love, compassion, and bodhicitta. And in terms of working towards the welfare of others, this depends upon love, compassion, and bodhicitta.
배나 자서 침보치는 방안 좀 다 드진다고 전 로요나. 어단 로비카라 배나 소소 집보게 된다 소노토네 타바치 가세 토바 이나 여보도 싫어하레스. 이나 이치도 마선 시간만 돼.
And so, in terms of our own happiness, this is important. But the problem with just focusing on our own happiness and not considering others is it doesn't get us to that shore of enlightenment where we want to go. It's a little bit like there's this vast ocean, and we've gone halfway to the middle of the ocean, and we've stopped there instead of going completely to the other shore.
배나 예티 다쳐마 샤리고도 뭔가 버스르다 타바토사를 다쳐마 짜치 오시라로 봤어. 이나요 조주지 세 토끼 빼나 먹에 더놀라고 지어봐 이나요 슈아차서 일 자디라 슈아차 그서
Semshindi.
어
Ale, karishe.
더놀데 조주지 세 토끼 더놀지가
Ale, los. So it is said that the hearer disciples, so yeah, chichana con su dracha moden su kogyo mari mi salvaden so those Shravaka disciples like Shariputra and Modgalyayana, right? They had this wish to achieve enlightenment for themselves alone. So that wish for a personal liberation. But it is said that the ones who have achieved liberation for themselves alone, and even an animal who brings forth the mind of bodhicitta, the animal who brings forth the mind of bodhicitta, he or she becomes the object of prostration. And so, really, we need to understand that this bodhicitta, which is rooted in the minds of love and compassion, this definitely has the power for us to completely actualize our own welfare and also for us to work towards the welfare of others. So also, when we have this awareness, it helps us to stop looking down on animals, for example, because we might think that we're some sort of higher form being a human being, but there are definitely animals that have brought forth love and compassion in their mind streams and are therefore worthy of respect. So in one of the sutras, the Buddha was asked, in terms of these minds of love, compassion, and bodhicitta, which type of the 6 types of beings within samsara can bring it forth? And the Buddha answered very clearly that love, compassion, and bodhicitta can be brought forth by all 6 types of sentient beings abiding in samsara. And in terms of the Buddha himself, it is said that Buddha Shakyamuni, when he newly brought forth love, compassion, and bodhicitta, he didn't do this when he was in human form. In fact, he did this as a bodhisattva when he was abiding in the unfortunate realms. So definitely when we hear these things, we should think like, I am in the human form right now, right? And if even those beings in the suffering states can bring forth these minds, I definitely can achieve them. So these are, these are the how the scriptures explain things. So this is really true. So somebody might ask, well, okay, you said that there's these beings, for example, an animal, but we said that they don't have the capacity of human intelligence. So how would it be possible for them to bring forth a mind like love, compassion, or bodhicitta? So actually it relates to this idea of what we call imprints. Geshe doesn't know how everybody does their own spiritual practice, but of course we're working and we're also taking a little bit of time to enjoy our lives, but hopefully along with that we're also doing a little bit of practice and meditation, and each time we do practice or we meditate and we bring forth those positive qualities, that's like planting an imprint or a seed within our mind. And when that seed meets with the right kind of conditions, it is going to ripen into a positive result. So when we talk about accumulating positive karma or accumulating merit and so forth, this process of accumulating these potentials is something super important. Yeah, so also, in terms of those beings who are holy beings now, they didn't become holy beings by just having a good time, right? They became holy beings by accumulating what is positive and purifying what is unwholesome in terms of their spiritual practice, right? That's how they got where they are. So many of you probably know about the great yogi Lord Milarepa. And Lord Milarepa, upon the outer appearance, was somebody who was in total poverty, not even enough to eat or drink. But Milarepa stated very clearly that there is no one who abides in this world who is happier than I am. So, in terms of the mind, we have the same mind that Milarepa had, right? So we can achieve the same things. So to make this first power, the power of the intention, kind of really effective, the vaster we can make that intention and make our mind, the more beneficial it will be. Yeah. Oh. So think, so we throw ahead the intention. I am going to develop in this good direction. To do this every day, in the morning, we say as we wake up, today it is so fortunate that I've woken up. I'm alive. I have a precious human life. I'm not going to waste it, but will use all the energies of this precious life today to develop a bodhicitta aim to achieve enlightenment in order to benefit others as much as possible. So, I am going to have kind thoughts towards others. So Geshe said this, talking about waking up, right? When we wake up in the morning and thinking in this way, this was thinking about the reasons that we have to be happy. So he talked a little bit about that at the beginning of the session. So this is one of the things we can do.
배가 라마 짜치 바탄 내지 마수게 될 라마 짜치 뭐지 알다. 다디 라마 때 군다 가르서 요아래.
로준님의 요새디로.
그다 로지 세기나 라마 요아래. 아거서로 군다 코를 잡아서 보아지 요아래. 대대 가마모 요아래. 가마모
So there was a story about a great Lama Tsen, and every night before he went to bed, he would turn over his cup and place it upside down on the table. And the reason that he did that was to remind himself of, I was drinking tea from this cup today, but I don't know if I'm still going to be alive to use it tomorrow. And then he would think about how his day went. So he said, what was I able to do today that was positive and unwholesome? What did I do that was maybe negative or unwholesome? And then he would confess and purify those negativities or the mistakes he had made that day. And as he went through this process of purification, thinking about perhaps the heaviest negativity he had done that day and confessing and purifying it, then he said, now I can sleep with a relaxed mind, knowing that even if I were to die tomorrow, I have purified this. Yeah. So Geshe said, he had that relaxed mind because he was able to confess the negativity. We can't say that you can just confess and it makes the negativity always go away, right? But it's a good habit to go. But at least he did something about it, right? Whatever negativity happened, he did something about it. Yeah. So then the first thing when he woke up, he would see that cup on the table near his bed and it was upside down, and he would think, oh, I still get to use this cup today. And then he would think, today it's so fortunate that that I've woken up, I am alive, and I have a precious human life. And then in this way, this power of intention, he uses that intention to set the motivation for the day. And it can be something just really simple, like today, I'm going to refrain from harming others as much as possible. And if I can, I will definitely benefit them. So many of you may be familiar with a practice that we have in our tradition called the 6-session Guru Yoga. So the 6-session Guru Yoga is normally recited by people 6 times in the morning and 6 times at night. But actually, ideally, it's recited every 4 hours. And Geshe was saying that this is interesting because scientists have found, like cognitive scientists, that the energy of a positive thought, it lifts kind of what's happening in the brain for about 4 hours. There's kind of a measurable lift for about 4 hours. Yeah, so of course they didn't have those like brain measuring instruments back when this 6-session yoga was interested, but the fact that it's every 4 hours is kind of interesting. Yeah. So then Geshe just said that in the morning, this is a really valuable time. We don't know if we'll be able to do it perfectly every time, of course, but we established a really positive motivation at the beginning of the day. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama says from the moment of waking up in the morning, he immediately brings method and wisdom into mind. He thinks about the mind of bodhicitta and also wisdom realizing emptiness. So, I am going to have kind thoughts towards others. I'm not going to be angry or have bad thoughts. As much as I can, I will use all my energies to help others, to be of benefit to others. So really, having from the very beginning of the day this attitude that I'm going to try to lessen the negative thoughts that are arising, and at minimum, I'm going to refrain from harming others. In addition, not only will I refrain from harming, but I will also try to benefit. And so now, just to go back to a discussion of the second one, the force of the white seed. So the second is the fourth force of the white seed, and here the text says, we create this with the prayer, may I achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So Geshe had spoken about why it's important to see all sentient beings as precious, and also to be able to want to work towards their happiness. So we bring that forth with this prayer, may I achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. And when we do this, right, when we make this aspiration to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of others, we do this with the awareness of others have been greatly kind to us. Everything that we enjoy, from the food that we eat to the clothes that we wear, comes about from the kindness of others. And then similarly, our ability to develop love, compassion, and achieve enlightenment comes due to the kindness of others. And if we're able to see directly the relationship between the happiness that we experience and other sentient beings, we'll be able to see others as kind and close to us. So in the instructions from the masters, it says that you offer your prostrations to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, the holy beings, but yet you completely regard sentient beings upon who your happiness depends. This is really inappropriate. In fact, our happiness and our achievement of enlightenment depends equally upon sentient beings and the Buddhas. In fact, it is almost like 50-50. So to offer respect to the Buddhas and to disregard sentient beings does not make any sense. So if we're able to kind of think in this way, in this broad way, right, this will immediately make us happier. So the power of repulsion, or the force of eliminating all at once, this means that once that negative thought, once that mental faults arise, we think that this is not the correct way of thinking, and we immediately counteract it.
미스를 당하고 내가 체크 말했어.
And so for the practitioner of mind training, really the force of eliminating all at once has to be directed to the two major obstacles to being able to train our mind successfully. And so this is mainly the self-cherishing or the self-centered attitude, and then behind that, the ignorance grasping at the self.
shombago nijigo shoju se ga twa ye bitin le ka cheba ina da ro jinzelu zo bu ko ne ba de 말했어.
So when we're trying to develop qualities like love, wishing others to have happiness in its causes, or compassion, wishing them to be free from suffering, the main thing that is blocking the development of that is the self-cherishing.
다 될 로바서 게 조 단지 말이 봐 세를 가로서 나 세나요 보게 샤라 고로 집어집어 때문에 되게 손지와 다 될, 소지.
And this self-cherishing can be rooted back to this fundamental attitude of thinking that the self is something stable and permanent, this ignorance grasping at the self.
고나요 맞대 봐 스킬 맞대 고로 되게 손지 가로서
That the self is something that is completely independent, not connected at all to other factors arising from its own side.
다 될 레벨 옆에 될 가제 다가 세야 리더에 돼 세들에 돼 리더처럼 뭐야 셀처럼 뭐 듣는 데도 뭐 돼서 저거 주사주면 또 somebody 된다고 다들 와야 돼 리더버리지.
So to counteract this ignorance grasping at the self, one of the things we can do is question its assumptions. Where is this stable self? Is there some stable, pinpointable essence somewhere in the body? Would it be in the head? Would it be in the torso and so forth? Or would it be within the mind? And then we see that in fact there is no pinpointable self-existing self whatsoever. And in this way we can quite easily counteract that mistaken conception.
놀러서 듣는 때 뭐지 나 세가지고 다 될 때는 강에서 주나 한 레벨 침모서
And in fact, it's because we grasp at this self as independent and self-existence that when the I or the self encounters even a small problem, it immediately is very upsetting. Because we're holding on that our self, that this capital letter I is something that is stable and unchanging. So there is an I, a functional I or self, but we exaggerate it. It's almost as if we have built like a metal body over the person. This ignorance grasping at the self is what reinforces all of the unwholesome minds, such as anger, such as attachment, and so forth. And the reason that we need to study emptiness, shunyata, the way that things really are, is to be able to counteract this ignorance grasping at the self, which is the source of all these problems. So love and compassion, as wonderful as they are, they won't help us to address that fundamental misconception, because that ignorance grasping at the self needs a direct antidote to be able to overcome it. So ignorance needs wisdom to defeat it, right? We can't pray away ignorance. As loving, as compassionate we are, we can't undermine ignorance just through that, because ignorance is an unknowingness, and that unknowingness needs wisdom as its antidote. So in this way we've been able to cover this text at least briefly, and so that this is the information that you want to that you want to have a science of the mind. So what are the wholesome states? What are the unwholesome states? In terms of the unwholesome states, what are the antidotes or the factors that can help us to overcome them? We have to be able to understand and apply that knowledge. So in terms of love, compassion, bodhicitta, these minds will help us to reduce this self-cherishing, self-centered attitude, as well as anger and so forth. But the root of affliction, which is the ignorance grasping at the self, love and compassion are not really able to undermine that properly. Because ignorance is based upon a fundamental mistaken understanding. The only way to counter it is through its antidote, which is with correct understanding. The antidote needs to measure up to the cause.
What are the different what are
So we will, because we are coming to the end of our time, then we will pause the discussion here. Geshe and I will just do a very brief dedication prayer, and then we'll take a couple of questions before we close. Through the merits that we have accumulated in this positive activity today, as well as through the positive accumulation of all sentient beings, may the wars, conflicts, and suffering currently so prominent in the world be completely pacified, be completely cleared away. May the imbalances of the elements manifesting as degradation and disasters and so forth, may these be completely pacified and the harmony of the elements be restored. May the merits become the cause for every type of sentient being, all 6 types of sentient beings, to have complete mental and physical happiness and ease. So we'll pause there. So Geshe was just saying that when we dedicate our merits in that way, often we dedicate the merits of ourselves and like the people who are engaged in the activity around us, but you can actually make that even vaster and think about all the positivity that all sentient beings are engaged in and dedicate that. So normally being greedy is like a fetter, like it's a negative state of mind, right? But when it comes to dedicating the merits, being greedy is actually a good thing. We want to think about all of the merits possible, not just ourselves in this room, but everybody here, everybody beyond these walls, every being in every country that's doing something positive, we want to dedicate that potential. So the Buddha said that a being endowed with merit is able to accomplish their aims exactly as they wish. So that means that like the more positive potential, the more of a collection of merit that we've accumulated, that we have built up, we'll be able to accomplish the goals that we set our mind to very easily. On the basis of that merit and that dedication, then we have the conditions for our study and our practice and our meditation to unfold very easily. Otherwise, realizations can take some time, and we might think, okay, I'm not having like these promised realizations, something must be going wrong. It's possible to be discouraged, so we have to remind ourselves. So any questions in the room first? Rudy, yes.
So I'm wondering if there is something wrong in the universe in total. We have the intention to leave. Did we ever have the intention to arrive here?
Yeah, nanzo di korwa di korlarwa, nanzo nganso tharpa tokores nganso tun korwa tungo gidus chikyerwa dikunung gogires yene korwa tambo lebya gikunung gogires kanisena di lebya gikunung menana dene tunya gikunung tetskala
Dilel komodo ini medio sejak kamar yoyo are ngazala.
So we didn't need to form an intention to come to samsara because this is kind of like our natural state, like it's just something that unfolds in a way.
Le kanti jina ta ki kono ko ge share ge kono le asmo
So like we accumulate the causes or the karma to be in samsara without even needing to set an intention, right? Because like we're used to it.
Ach dembore manusia ge yo no kono ach manda was kas.
But of course, but joking aside, when we talk about a positive rebirth in samsara, like being a human being, normally we say you need to have an intention and positive karma behind that, yeah?
Ya zo malenter pena kelana ro changa yushe ko de so si yona delba be korokta manusia ge le ji so ko de so tembo ko kas.
So if you say like, I want to be reborn as a human being in Canada again, for example, you'll make that specific intention and you'll accumulate the merits, and that can, if all goes well, lead to you being reborn here.
Der da se pena la sheki mo yo as la sheki de zombel le de kaso ge zombel le so yares. De kol.
그래서
거기서 가르치는 소리가 있어요. 기노게 맞을 때 거기서 가르쳐서 소리가 있어요. 내가 시험은 채팅와 내가 뭐 기본 만들. 내가 고마시는 체리와 가디나 기본에 어디시 그것도
So we talked about these deva beings, right? We talked about these beings in like it's often translated as the god realms, but I think that can be really problematic. So just these celestial beings, maybe that's a good word. So these celestial beings, they are thinking like, okay, they're in the form and formless realm, right? So they think this desire realm, the place where we are here now, they say, I don't want to be reborn in the desire realm. It has too many problems, too much suffering. May I be reborn in these celestial realms? On the basis of that intention and the karma that they accumulate, they're able to be reborn there. And actually, in terms of making that intention and accumulating the karma to go to those realms, you find this in different religious systems, not only in Buddhism, right? There's other religious traditions where you're able to pray for that and achieve that. So thinking about what these beings do is they think about the disadvantages of this desire realm where we are, and by thinking about these disadvantages, that acts as like an antidote. And so on the basis of that, thinking that there's so many problems here, the way to solve this is to get out of this desire realm and instead to be reborn in like these godlike realms. And then on that basis, they develop like a renunciation for this, and the afflictions, the attachments to this desire realm and its enjoyments, these decrease. Yeah. And so then they might go to the form realm, and then they may think in the form realm there's still this coarse kind of corporeal form, and that leads to a lot of suffering. So then may I be reborn in the formless realm. So that also becomes a powerful antidote to the attachment to those realms of the desire and the form realms. Yeah. And so that process, right, of seeing those disadvantages and developing that wish and intention, that means that they're reborn in those different places. Yeah, and so as long as we don't create that wish to be liberated from samsara, we'll continuously be reborn within it in a sort of... So if we think, okay, I want to be reborn at least as a human being next time, so I better accumulate some good karma so that I can ensure that. We've already created the cause to be reborn in samsara, right? To be reborn in this universe, as you said. right? We didn't have to have that specific intention.
다 타바선도 매너다. 다 타바 토토거든. 타바 토바나 머리시거든. 디테일 다 주마시는 거거든. 사는 다고 제 도월했어.
But if you think, okay, I want to be reborn as a human being because I wasn't able to get advanced enough in my spiritual practice this lifetime, so I want to be reborn as a human being so that I can then work towards liberation, then you're wishing for that human rebirth, but also with that little bit higher aspiration for liberation.
세계도 와서 코알이야 그 도시에도 와서 하고서 타바 저거도 손지 저거 손지 세 저거도 어디를 때자 지금 저거도 사나 코아시아도 콜레 쇼들레 와서.
So even if you're wishing to, like, for the sake of developing bodhicitta, for the sake of achieving Buddhahood, for the sake of achieving liberation, I want to have a good human rebirth, right? Which is in the Lamrim. We have that wish, right? That part about having a good human rebirth, you've already created the cause to come into samsara again, even though it's positive. Yeah.
I guess what I was wondering was, why are we in the birth system to start with?
Yeah, I know.
Is there a
I was
primary
trying to.
source?
Yes, I was trying to push that. Nanso kari chene korwa tambo lesson di lama son segidu. Tambo kari chene lesson di lama son sa.
또 가르치려서
Yeah, korwa tambo kari chene
다
lesson.
대세는 되게 말이야. 대세는 되게 말이야. 코알라 투마메 타마요잖아 말이야.
So the question is kind of, it's not the right question in a way, sort of, because there's no beginning to samsara. There's only an end to samsara. So there's no beginning. So that, we always think things are measurable, right? Like everything is developed around something being measurable. But like this mystery of samsara is that there's no beginning point, right? So it's not measurable from the point of, like, we can say, like, this is how samsara began or how we entered it. There's no beginning. And just like there's no beginning to samsara, that we call the self, or that we call the I, the stream of consciousness, if you will, it is also beginningless.
So we only got the exit.
Then also chila dosa mare namla yongsa medusa. Yeah, exit mato medusa namla yongsa yong mare se. Yeah. The entrance is, we can't posit it because we've always been here. Yes, but that's true. So it's beginningless is the answer. Like empty space, right? Like we like, is there a beginning of empty space? Is there an end to empty space? Can you ever reach the end of empty space? Probably not. So it's a bit like that. But the important thing for us as practitioners, that although it's beginningless, there is an end. There's an end to samsara, there's an end to affliction. There's an end to suffering, and that's an amazing thing. So that means that we don't have to have problems and suffering forever, and that's great. Dave, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so there was a claim made towards the beginning that anger didn't have a basis in reality.
Yeah.
And that there wasn't a lot of explanation of how that could be said to be true. Later on, there was a bit of discussion around wisdom and the nature of the self, so maybe that has something to do with it. But it made me question, okay, why can we say that anger doesn't have a basis in reality? Because I get angry when I'm harmed. There's definitely some harm happening. So yes. How can you say that isn't a real thing?
Yeah. Nanso di ngama di tengi to roa yomares control seri di dempa yomares roa pet zumares inedi kandis laugare karin sena pet dempa mares la di tes go to mi redua karin sena michi ngala nönana deninga dong lang gire dua roa gimsen pet me pa mare ko the gas chi kyong yo mare ko mi jenda di nupa ke la teni chomores denedi dempa mares di zumares la tes kala kabure dua
야 카드 제세다는 제세대 요바나 오신데 왔어.
So if you look directly, yes, it will quite appear that there's like a reason to be angry.
이나 콘로 그 짜와데 바데로 이나 자로 될 소스도 가리 알세는 코드자레에서 스치 골라 못티피 나지 보여 스킨 소스
But
짜와데.
you have to trace back to what's behind the anger, which is pointing to this. If it's a person that's made you upset, this person is completely bad, and they exist exactly in the way that I think they do, which means that there is some kind of pinpointable, independent self to that person.
콘로 참모델이 되레스.
So that's when you go from the coarser level of anger to the more subtle level.
콘로 참모 대저 참모 가르리기나 기 자로로 바즈마리 소스지.
So we have to understand that behind that anger or behind that attachment in every instance, the ignorance grasping at the self, which is completely incorrectly perceiving the object, is operating. So in that way, it's not true.
다데 체 도버티마도 손지기 주세가라 저다마와 여거는 체 도버 탄자가 마도 세지라도.
And in fact, like when we talk about this, that there's no pinpointable essence whatsoever, even different schools of Buddhist philosophy are not agreeing on the extent of that, right? So we talk about those 4 philosophical schools, and it's really only in the Prasangika school that you come to that full understanding.
다 이니미지 되고도 가만했어. 아주 컨트롤을 가라. 내서 노아지다. 내서 때대 요아 왔어. 유저 때대 요아를 나로서 때를 합이 주자지다.
So
군도가
also, what is not based in reality is, okay, that person harms us and we get angry at us. But the way that we're seeing that person might not be a representation of who they are. They might be a little bit bad, but because they've harmed us, we see them as completely bad. That's also an interpretation that's not grounded in reality. So the appearance and the mode of apprehension of that appearance is mistaken. The appearance can have a little bit of truth in it, right? It's maybe not completely false. But the mode in which we're apprehending it, right, as like truly existent and whatnot, that is mistaken. So also when we develop love and compassion, right, the appearances upon which we're developing that love and compassion can also have some there's an apprehension of true existence there. So there could still also be an element of a mistaken conception. But because from the beginning love and compassion are rooted in truth, despite the maybe incorrect mode of apprehension at that appearance, we don't say that they're in the same way fundamentally mistaken or not grounded in truth. Yeah, so any mind we look at in terms of the appearance and its mode of apprehension, those different minds have kind of different characteristics. And so why are these manifesting differently? They're manifesting because of the different seeds and imprints that are ripening. And also, just to be clear, some texts say that seed and imprint are exactly the same, but here we're not holding that. Listen. Yes, sir.
You can't be completely bad, and you can't be completely good either, I assume.
Pet duksha chatugyo maris, then pet yabo chatugyo maris. We can become completely good because we can achieve Buddhahood. Yeah. So Tara, right, she began as an ordinary woman who was born in human form, and she said that until samsara is empty of suffering beings, I'm going to appear in the form of a female Buddha to lead beings to liberation and bring them benefit. So that's the power of an intention, and isn't it? Yeah. Manushi.
I'm still actually not clear, based on what you just said, how love and compassion are based on truth.
So the jamba dang ningje demba la tene yong yeres kare cheneres kare sena yang namo tezuma yere dua the yawache dang kandesres.
Because I can still see, you can still grasp that the person is inherently.
Tatong zintang chikere roa rang chiki
What's
drupa.
the difference?
Tene kepar kandesres. So there is, you're right, there is an appearance of true existence or inherent existence, yes.
이나 키가 세변에 정말 최고 잘하고 이나 세제요 매번 요zul을 내가 그것도 주는 야가라 사 기소증이네 되어왔어.
But what is the mind of great love, for example, thinking? May every sentient being have complete happiness and its causes. In that sense, it's grounded in truth, even if the mode of apprehension has something mistaken.
이지 전부이나 감각 강에도 다소는 간디 야가라 손쓰지가
In the thing of great compassion, thinking how wonderful if all beings were separated from suffering and the causes of suffering, right? That's the mind, separate from the mode of apprehension.
아 되려 여가지 가르가.
So what mind do you need better than that?
위시 소스기네 대야기네 되려도 왔어.
Yeah.
소소 두는데 젠다 소소기네 되고 두는데 요소 두는 거 이만도 왔어.
And it's based on truth because every last sentient being, whether you think of yourself, whether you think of other beings, any sentient being you point to, they have that basic wish to be free from suffering and to have a lasting happiness. We couldn't really say that's mistaken, could we? That all beings want to be free from suffering. Oh. So that would be his answer.
Facebook.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Another question?
Really question because I'm new.
No problem. Absolutely
Yeah.
welcome.
So if there's no self,
Yep.
who is doing the wishing? And is the thought and the thinker the same? Like, if I have self-cherishing, so who is aware of that? Or you said this mind can be patient or angry.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Is there a watcher watching that, or
Yes.
how do I know?
Yes,
if there's
yes.
no I.
Nganso dag sere di yo marerwa, kangsa ki dag yo marese ki duarwa, ine di dag di menala nganso di menlam gi top. Tene menlam su kya gi res, rwa. Tene duksha di lagen su yeres, rwa. Tene de yapo chik chepapu su yeres, dag di menala di khandis drogi resa. So there's a paradox actually that you pointed to, and Geshe was saying this is a good point, right? We talk about selflessness, so there is that idea of no self, but there's also that nominal functional self. And so what we have to do is develop our capacity to differentiate between the selflessness that is the object of negation, right, and the functional self. So sorry, this thing's
So
not
who's
getting.
thinking?
So when we say, so when we say that like there is young girls no. So there is a self, right, that makes prayers. There is a self that brings forth bodhicitta. There is a self that gets enlightened. There is a self that achieves Buddhahood. So there is a self that's doing all of that. So that's like you said, the doer, right? So there is that self that's there. But when we say selflessness, right? When we talk about selflessness or the emptiness of the I, what is that I that is selfless? What is that I that is empty? The I that is permanent, independent, an I that operates completely independently, not arising due to other factors coming together. Also that permanent I or self, many religious systems talk about a permanent I or self. That when we talk about selflessness, we're also refuting that those who say that I is permanent. And even as beginners, right, in Buddhist cultivation, we do have this conception that there is this kind of independent self that exists apart from its causes and conditions. And those conceptions that we have within our mind, that there is a self that is permanent and that is independent and that does not arise independence upon other causes and conditions, that conception actually harms us. Because the thinking behind that whole story is being told to us by this ignorance, the misconception of ignorance. And if we don't get rid of that ignorance that is misapprehending the self, then we'll continuously experience problems.
This way.
No.
돈이 또나 가봐. 돈이 많도나 거와 보시는.
So when emptiness is realized, liberation. When emptiness is not realized, samsara. In other words, the cycle of existence.
야, demora 다 매세 다 요세 깨지지 또 따라치 말텐 뭐.
So when we say selfless, we have to identify what kind of the self is not there. And when we talk about the nominal self, we have to say what kind of self is operating. So yes, it's a very good point.
야, 지발레가 있어 텐거라도 왔어.
Yeah, so but it does, when you first hear it, it's like it sounds kind of the same. So it's, yes, it is. Yeah, you have to. Yeah, it's someone telling you mumbo to. Any other questions?
Two questions for Facebook.
Okay, Facebook Chiwatusa.
So first question is, I have non-Buddhist friends celebrating the downfall of Trump quite joyously, to the point of wishing even his being abused in prison, for instance. Is silence perhaps the best option with those most passionate against him? I'm not able to rise to attack, but I also willing to gently encourage compassion, and that is not usually received well.
Dene ko nampa maingengi chopo mambudua ta Donald Trump ko kange mambu chunsa Donald Trump kange chunimi mambu Jesu irang watang o ko tsun kangla drona ko kange hale pe chambu chuna yapo yore samgi dusura ko so di labna kandes chichagres chika malabna yagadus karinsana ningje gogires jambo gogires lamna konso lam samjishana namwa drogi duas di chuati
매미 다대 야 다대 소소 빠져서 가라왔어. 깨지시야 배도 여기지 얘는 시다. 대시야 배도 뭔가를 꾸며줘야 그래.
So the first step is to see the person that I want to talk to. If I give this different perspective, is that something that is going to bring benefit, or is that something that is just going to upset them? And if it's not going to bring benefit, you might be better off not saying anything actually. Because normally we want our speech to lead to fewer problems, not to add to problems. So if you know that your friend has this really dislikes Trump, and that's their view, and then you say something to counter that, if it's just going to cause an argument or make them upset, it's not very beneficial to say anything, is it?
The other question on Facebook was just a request to list the 5 forces, just the titles of the 5.
Yeah, so top nga din so ale titsku again the top nga din so laro ches chiksik do. Yeah, so I will list the 5 forces, but I also want to say that these are all available on the website Study Buddhism. So that's where we, and we'll provide a link for folks. I'll put it on Facebook as well in the comments, but I'll read them out for you. So the first is intention. The second is the white seed. The third is repulsion, sometimes translated as eliminating all at once. The fourth is prayer, and the fifth is habituation. So I'll say one more time. Intention, white seed, repulsion, prayer, habituation. Oh, Jesus. So thank you very much, everybody, for those of you who are here and for those of you online, and we shall see you next time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.